Well, we go to Anfield, one of the more ferocious venues in England, on Sunday.
Mm.
And, I'm curious your thoughts as a longtime Arsenal fan. For me, Tottenham and Chelsea and United are the great enemies who we just simply must defeat and destroy. Liverpool, I always want to beat, and we've fought, big Champions League ties. When I first became a supporter in the late 2000s, I remember we would meet them all the time in the quarterfinals,
Sure.
or I think we did a semifinal with them too. We have history with Liverpool, the
Hmm.
1989 and everything. What are your feelings about Liverpool Football Club as an Arsenal fan?
Um, Listen, my brother is a Liverpool fan, so I grew up, with that rivalry. And when I was growing up, Liverpool were by some distance the best team in England. They won the league, they won the European Cup as it was back then, the Champions League as it is now. They were huge, and they had an aura, they had a presence that I think our win at Anfield in 1989 went some way to crack, because Liverpool won the league the next year. But then after that, it took them 30 years to win the league again. And for a club of Liverpool's size, it's, that's kind of crazy, even in this sort of modern football era with the Chelseas and the Uniteds and all of that, and Man Cities coming along. It was crazy. And when you think about some of the points totals they got under Jurgen Klopp and still didn't win the league,
Yeah.
I know people, I don't want to say I have a soft spot for Liverpool. I don't, clearly. They're a big rival, and I want them to lose all the time. Where I saw Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, when we were struggling, I saw Liverpool as not an example, but an illustration of how you could be competitive with smart investment and the right manager. That, listen, it's sort of crazy. Liverpool are owned by American billionaires. Arsenal are owned by American billionaires. So can you call those two clubs underdogs when you're competing with Manchester City? Maybe, because the spending power is different. But I sort of saw Liverpool as a way of clinging on to hope that football could be good again and competitive again, from an Arsenal perspective, because we were in the doldrums for such a long time. So look, I've got a long history of pain inflicted upon me by Liverpool. I've also enjoyed some very special Arsenal moments when we've beaten Liverpool. I kind of see them as the team this season to beat. They've invested well, and like you say, they spent quite a bit of money at the start of the window, and it made it look like it was going to be really, really tough. I think we've come close to matching them in terms of how we've strengthened our squad. But I would love nothing more than for us to turn them over at Anfield. I think our record there in recent years is quite good. I'm just looking, like the last time we lost there in the Premier League was 2021,
That is great.
and we've drawn the last three times um, in the Premier League there. I hope we go one better. I'd probably, if you ask me now, I'd probably take a draw. That might come across as stupid on Sunday after we win 3-0 or something, but it is one of those fixtures where I think it is really, really tough. We've played well there, and then the dynamic of the game changes within that stadium, and it's always a tough one. It is always a tough one. But I think if we are going to win the league this season, Liverpool will be the team to beat.
Yeah. No, I think I know what you're saying about the soft spot, and that, I watched some unfortunate TalkSport yellers who shall not be named, one of whom has a Chelsea affiliation, react to the Eberechi Eze announcement video with Ian Wright. And, they're saying it's cringe, they're mocking it. And the first thing that came to mind for me was that Chelsea could never do a video like this because they don't really have a culture around the club outside of money and trophies, basically. And they have been successful for a couple decades now. But that's not something you could ever say of Liverpool, as much as we're all throwing money around now. And sometimes I worry about the amount of money that's getting thrown around. But it does feel materially different, this football club, Liverpool. And I would even say it about Manchester United, as much as I despise them. It feels more grounded in, real green shoots that come out of the ground for some reason. And maybe
Yeah.
that's artificial. Maybe I'm a fool, but that's what it feels like.
Well, the Manchester United's success was predicated on a huge financial advantage, which they had in the 90s, which was they recognized before anybody else the value and the reach of their brand, right?
Yeah.
They earned their money. They had a big stadium, 70 odd thousand seater stadium. They had a worldwide fan base, and they had a marketing team that was second to none anywhere in the world of football at that point. So this Manchester United machine was able to print money. They were able to invest in the team. They had a brilliant crop of young players come through their academy. They augmented them with brilliant players. They spent a load of money, but they spent their own money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was not a case of Abramovich at Chelsea coming in and just going, well, here's all the millions I stole from the Russian people, and I'll buy us, 10 strikers in one window. I have to respect that about Manchester United, that they spent their own money and they made everybody else catch up. And it took years and years. And still Manchester United is a behemoth in terms of merchandising and marketing and endorsement, all of those things, sponsorship deals, all of it. And it stems from the fact that someone can tell the story better than I can, a Manchester United fan, they recognized what they had and the way the world was going and the way the game was going global, and they raked in the money. But it was their money. It wasn't a nation state. It wasn't an oligarch. It wasn't a billionaire. They made their own money. And again, I don't have any soft spot for Manchester United, but I think when I think back to that rivalry that we had at that time, what you had were two brilliantly run football clubs in Arsenal and Manchester United, one of whom had a massive financial advantage. And Arsenal were able to compete because of the brilliance of Arsene Wenger, because of the sort of advantage he had with the French transfer market, his knowledge of the French market, the sort of knowledge of European players, which was before a time where every club knew every player and every kick and every stat. He was able to get players and bring them into Arsenal and make this amazing team. And that rivalry, and I know it's sort of, it harks back to your younger days, right? When everything felt more intense and everything felt as good as it could possibly be. But there was something very special about that rivalry because you had two teams who hated each other. They were brilliant, skillful, feisty, violent, whatever, and these games were full of that intensity and quality. Maybe that's the last time in English football that will have happened in that sort of, I don't want to say it's organic, but without the sort of financial landscape shifting in the way it did after Abramovich came into Chelsea, and everybody had to react to that. So they got their billionaire owners and they got their marketing departments and all of that, So I've gone on a bit of a long one there, but yeah,
No.
I sort of see United and Liverpool adjacent in that regard. The ownerships, of course, have changed, but I'm still glad they're doing badly. But there was maybe something. I don't want to say it's pure. Do you know what I mean? It's not pure because even then there were questions, and where does that money come from, and who's getting paid how much, and all of that. But it felt like the end of one particular era before we slid into one, which I think is a lot more. There's a lot more to be cynical about in the era that we live in now, as opposed to back then.
I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Infantino is a great man.
Don't get me started on that guy.